One of the things I'm honestly not that good at is predicting what will and won't get a lot of mainstream media attention. Because there will be things that Trump will do at rallies, for example, or in interviews that are just insane that don't get any mainstream press attention. And of course, on sort of online platforms, especially left of center shows, it's become a usual thing to cover a lot of clips from Trump interviews and speeches, and sometimes 10, 12 clips are prominently circulating. But it's not the same in the mainstream media world. They have to pick, well, they choose to at least pick very limited moments to cover from it, which I honestly think is a disservice because people then get sane washed what it is that he's doing and saying day to day if they just see one little moment. But also it leads to me not understanding exactly when or being able to predict something will get a lot of emphasis. Well, something that Trump said in an interview has gotten a lot of emphasis in mainstream press, which I'm happy to see. And it's reminding people right before the election of how dangerous what Trump is intending on doing is. So you've seen this a few times. I'll play it for you again. In this particular one, the Republican Voters Against Trump account is pointing out, here's the initial interview moment. Here's what was edited out of this when they played it at the Trump town hall for Trump. But even Trump's being confronted with it. And then I'll show you Kamala Harris bringing up at a rally, a segment Jake Tapper did, and then Republicans having to answer for what Trump said here.
I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of election day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
And then it's going to get to him being shown this clip in the Fox interview and how they left out him saying the military or National Guard should deal with the radical left. What? And remember, he's used that phrase, enemy from within, enemy. And in a different speech, I think it was, he said, like Adam Schiff was the example he gave. So he's not talking about, as later I'll show you Republican trying to justify this with, oh, no, he's talking about people who riot. He cites Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, etc., as the enemy from within, and then he's talking about the military National Guard. But they didn't include that part in the Fox News town hall.
Tell me, let's watch it.
If we have to.
Yeah.
We have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries, because if you have a smart president, he can handle them pretty easily. But the thing that's tougher to handle are these lunatics that we have inside, like Adam Schiff. I call him the enemy from within. I think the bigger problem is...
So I guess the Adam Schiff thing was from that interview. But there, you saw it. In the same interview, he's saying, like Adam Schiff, the enemy from within. Maybe we deal with that with the military or National Guard. Just a wildly threatening thing to say. Fox News didn't include the military part when they played the clip for the audience. I wonder why. And the fact that Trump says this, he doesn't have to. This doesn't help his campaign. It riles up his base, but that's it. But it does remind people of what is so unhinged about him. And it finally gets more attention on the insanity that Trump's saying and doing day to day. I know you think everyone's talking about that. No, when I tune into mainstream media, they're not giving the coverage of the hundreds of crazy moments a week from his events that I think should be given. Luckily, we saw coverage like this on that moment.
From within is
and let me play this from the beginning. By the way, remember to click that subscribe button if you haven't already.
With just 22 days left until Election Day, former President Donald Trump is claiming that his political opponents are more dangerous than foreign adversaries of the United States.
It's the enemy from within, all the scum that we have to deal with that hate our country. That's a bigger enemy than China and Russia.
The quote, enemy from within, is a phrase that the former president repeated yesterday in an interview on Fox.
We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries.
Trump went on to suggest how he might handle these so-called enemies from within on Election Day should he win in November.
We have some sick people, radical left lunatics, and I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
So who exactly are these enemies from within that Mr. Trump says he would consider deploying the military or the National Guard against? Someone that, as Trump suggests, poses a greater threat to national security than Russia or China. Who are they?
The thing that's tougher to handle are these lunatics that we have inside, like Adam Shifty Schiff.
Okay, U.S. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, a Democrat from California, right in the area I am right now, Los Angeles, who is now running for a seat in the U.S. Senate. He was the lead prosecutor in Trump's first impeachment trial. So, as a factual matter, stripping this of all adjectives and any bias, the Republican nominee is telling you that as commander-in-chief, he will contemplate using the United States military or National Guard to go after his political opponents, including Democrats, such as the likely next U.S. Senator from California, Adam Schiff.
How do you apologize for that? How do you justify that? That is authoritarianism. That's what Trump's promising. And why so many people go, oh no, but he's just being sort of goofy and silly and not literal. It's abstract. He's going to go after them with the metaphorical military. I don't know how you could have values I thought were sort of the values that made Americans Americans and support that. Kamala Harris addressed this as well.
And so after all these years, we know who Donald Trump is. He is someone who will stop at nothing to claim power for himself. And you don't have to take my word for it. I've said for a while now, watch his rallies. Listen to his words. He tells us who he is. And he tells us what he would do if he is elected president. So here tonight, I will show you one example of Donald Trump's worldview and intentions. Please roll the clip.
The worst people are the enemies from within. The enemy from within. Those people are more dangerous, the enemy from within, than Russia and China. These people should be put in jail the way they talk about our judges and our justices. Now, if you had one really violent day, one rough hour, and I mean real rough. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
So you heard his words. You heard his words coming from him. He's talking about the enemy within Pennsylvania. He's talking about the enemy within our country, Pennsylvania. He's talking about that he considers anyone who doesn't support him or who will not bend to his will an enemy of our country.
Yeah. And another thing that really frightens me is how willing to abandon our common identity as Americans MAGA seems to be. Because I think something that's so necessary for a healthy political dialogue, we clearly can still have a political dialogue without this, but for a healthy political dialogue, for a healthy democracy, you need an understanding that we can battle it out electorally. We can disagree. We can sometimes hate the views of people we disagree with. But at the end of the day, we all care about this so much because we love our country collectively. We're all in this together in some sense. We're all Americans. But the Trump message says that no, because adversaries, leaders and countries we've long considered to be adversaries, or at least we understand a national security threat is posed by them at times, they're not as bad and thus as far from the American values that we stand for as the people that we disagree with politically. That's the MAGA message. And it's scary, and it deteriorates a really necessary part of a democracy. If we really believe that our fellow Americans are bigger enemies to us than real enemies of the United States, things can fall apart really quickly, which is why I really do value and respect and appreciate how much Vice President Kamala Harris has leaned into both saying she's going to have a Republican in her cabinet, saying, doing events with Liz Cheney, showing that of different political views, we can still agree on our Constitution and democracy and our common identity as Americans, and leaning into patriotic messaging, because you can want significant change. You can want people's lives to be made better and injustices addressed while still loving and feeling patriotic about the country. And that's the message that Kamala Harris is bringing forward, because that allows for a really good alternative to the dystopian, this country sucks, other countries, our opponent and our enemy is not some foreign dictator, but instead the Americans we coexist with. That is nicely contrasted with a Harris message that's much more unifying and patriotic. Byron Donalds, the Republican congressman, got asked about this. Look at him bending himself into pretzels over this.
Or do you think it would be appropriate to use the United States military to address any chaos after the election?
Oh, well, it was good to
Wait, how is that the question? That's not what he said at all. Okay.
be with you. Obviously, we don't want to have the United States military. We're not going to have that be deployed in the United States. That's been long-standing law in our country since the founding of the Republic. But I think it is important to note that if there is a time where you have to deploy the National Guard, like Donald Trump did want to do on January 4th of 2021, when he authorized 10,000 National Guard troops to be at the U.S. Capitol for January 6th, that is something where it could be appropriate. Look, at the end of the day, the biggest thing we want is a continued use and an application of a peaceful transition of power. And I think that's the thing that...
Really? So I must have been thinking of a different clip, because that was unbelievable that the question was framed that way. Of course, sometimes the National Guard gets involved in scenarios of rioting. The military doesn't get deployed, as was mentioned, but Trump never stipulated, I should say, that this would be for chaos. That wasn't even the topic of conversation. He was just saying that people in our country are so much worse than people in other countries, the ones that he doesn't like in this country. I'm annoyed that it was sane-washed like that. But then you have Glenn Youngkin, who struggles more with Jake Tapper here.
You heard some of the language that Mr. Trump used over the weekend. What do you think of this idea of, quote, we have some sick people, radical left lunatics, and I think it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, the National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military. Is that something that you support?
Jake, first of all, thank you for having me. And I guess what I want to just make very clear is that it's my belief that what former President Trump is talking about are the people that are coming over the border that, in fact, are...
In that clip, he specifically said, the people I'm talking about are even worse than those coming into the country. He literally said that, Glenn. So it can't be the same people because he's saying the people that are the enemy within are worse than the people who are coming across the border illegally. Oh.
Are committing crimes, that are bringing drugs, that are trafficking humans, and that are turning every state into a border state. And I'm a governor of a state that is not near the southern border, and yet I see the impacts of 10 million people illegally coming across the border every single day.
Oh, interesting. That didn't happen, though.
5 Virginians die on average from fentanyl overdose. We have folks that have crashed, the illegal immigrants that have crashed the front gate at Quantico in a box truck, trying to gain access to Quantico. And we've had Virginians who have been subjected to sexual assaults by Venezuelan gang members. So to say that this isn't happening, Jake, is just...
What? That's not at all the topic of conversation, Glenn. Of course, they act like there's not bipartisan support for locking up, first of all, people who commit crimes. And then if it's an undocumented immigrant who commits a heinous crime like that, then deport them. Or if they commit on U.S. soil, do they serve a sentence here? Regardless, I think you deport them. But whatever the law says, do it, which is being done.
Not fair to Americans. And so it is happening.
I'm not saying that at all. Obviously, there is a border crisis. Obviously, there are too many criminals who should not be in this country, and they should be jailed and deported completely. But that's not what I'm talking about, because he was talking about sick people, radical left lunatics who should be handled by the National Guard or the military. And then later on in that same speech, he said that one of the lunatics he addressed was Congressman Adam Schiff. That's who he was talking about using the National Guard and military against radical left lunatics, enemy from within, people like Adam Schiff.
Again, Jake, I don't think that I can't.
I'm just reading you his
speak
quotes.
for him, but I do think that you are misinterpreting and misrepresenting his thoughts. I do believe, again, it's all around the fact that we have had an unprecedented.
Okay, and then he gets back to that. Trump specifically said not that. Okay, just admit you can't defend it. I think you're misinterpreting or mispresenting his thoughts. Well, then he's mispresenting his thoughts. He's messing up his communication because we're just reading back to you what he said. Scott Jennings on CNN defended this.
And that has nothing to do with the Kamala Harris campaign, Scott.
If Election Day comes and radical elements who have clearly flaunted our norms and laws all over this country were to do something, I don't know why you wouldn't consider all options to stop it.
They did do something. Hang on. They did it on January 6th.
Exactly. If you're going to talk about people who actually did something,
we have proof.
There's
and they
history
were
there.
His
and
people.
It's not ours.
They were people.
And law enforcement and the National Guard should control that too.
Right,
I don't disagree.
But the problem
you act like I think that didn't happen.
I'm not saying that you don't think it didn't happen and that there's a problem, but the problem is that.
And again, they're fixating on Election Day. Nowhere, I watched that full interview. I prepared a segment about it, and I watched that segment clip multiple times. Nowhere does he contextualize it with, because people might challenge the election if I win. That wasn't said. But everyone assists Trump by taking what he says and going, no, but I think that he meant, just take what he said. He's an adult. Or you admit he can't speak for himself because he's like a little baby in the way that he turns thought to speech. So then you probably don't want that person as president. Either he can speak like a normal person and he can articulate his thoughts in a way that we should take literally, or you think he speaks in such abstractions and is so incoherent and so childlike in the way that he thinks and then speaks that we shouldn't have him as the most powerful communicator on the planet. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Get the bonus show. Join us on the bonus show. Today's your day by clicking the join button.